The first time my brother-in-law touched me, I convinced myself it was an accident. The second time, I told myself I was overthinking it. By the 10th time, I realized something far more terrifying. He never did it when my husband was looking. The worst part wasn't what my brother-in-law did. It was what my husband said. Every single time I begged him to believe me. "Emma, you're imagining it." Those 3 words nearly destroyed my marriage. My name is Emma. I'm 34 years old. And until last year, I believed the safest place in the world was beside my husband. I was wrong. It all started on a Sunday afternoon, at my mother-in-law's birthday party. The house was full. Children were running through the backyard. Music played from the kitchen. Everyone was laughing. Daniel, my husband, was outside helping his father with the barbecue. I carried a tray of drinks into the dining room. As I squeezed between 2 chairs, someone placed a hand on my waist. Not for balance. Not by accident. It stayed there, long enough, that I felt every finger. I turned around. It was Mark, Daniel's older brother. He smiled as though nothing had happened. "Careful. Wouldn't want you dropping those." I stepped away immediately. My heart was racing. Maybe he'd simply been trying to help. That's what I wanted to believe. 5 minutes later, Daniel came inside. I pulled him into a hallway. "I need to tell you something." His smile faded. "What happened?" I lowered my voice. "I think Mark just touched me." Daniel frowned. Then, he laughed. "Emma, he's always been like that." "What do you mean?" "Friendly. He doesn't have personal space." I looked past Daniel. Across the room, Mark was talking to relatives. Smiling. Laughing. The perfect older brother. Then, for just a second, he looked directly at me. And smiled. Not the smile he'd been showing everyone else. A different one. A smile that silently said, "No one will ever believe you." I wanted to leave the party. Right then. Right there. But Daniel squeezed my hand. "Mom's cutting the cake. 5 more minutes." 5 minutes. I told myself I could survive 5 more minutes. I couldn't. Everyone gathered around the dining table, shoulder to shoulder, laughing, taking pictures. Daniel stood beside his mother. I ended up across the room. Then, I felt someone standing behind me. I didn't even have to turn around. I already knew. Mark leaned closer. Close enough that no one else would have noticed. Without looking at me, he whispered, "You look nervous." I stepped away. He stepped too. Then, while everyone sang happy birthday, his hand brushed across mine, slowly. Not enough for anyone else to see. Enough for me to know. It wasn't accidental. The song ended. Everyone applauded. Children cheered. Phones flashed. I looked around the room. No one had noticed. Not one person. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark smiling. By morning, I'd convinced myself Daniel was right. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe I was reading too much into ordinary things. For 3 weeks, I avoided every family gathering. Every excuse I made, Daniel had a solution. "You're tired? We'll leave early. You have work? I'll drive separately. You don't feel like going? Mom will be disappointed." Eventually, I gave in. The next family dinner was at Mark's house. As soon as we walked through the front door, he greeted Daniel with a hug. Then he turned to me. Instead of hugging me, He leaned close to my ear, so quietly that no one else could hear. I was wondering if you'd come back. My blood ran cold. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't considered before. Mark wasn't making mistakes. He was watching me. He knew exactly when I skipped family gatherings. And somehow, he knew the reason why. For the next 2 months, I became an expert at avoiding my own brother-in-law. If Mark walked into the kitchen, I found a reason to leave. If everyone gathered in the living room, I stayed near the children. If Daniel stepped outside, I followed him. I never told Daniel why, because every time I thought about bringing it up, I heard the same words. You're imagining it. Then Thanksgiving arrived. Daniel's parents insisted everyone come. His mother even called me personally. It won't feel the same if you're not here. I couldn't think of another excuse. The moment we arrived, I noticed Mark watching me from the driveway. He wasn't smiling. He was waiting. As soon as Daniel went to help unload the food, Mark walked over. Need a hand? I'm fine. He ignored my answer. He picked up the casserole dish anyway, letting his fingers slide across mine before taking it. I pulled my hand back. He acted as though nothing had happened. Inside, everyone laughed, talked, shared old family stories. I couldn't concentrate. Every few minutes, I'd look around the room, searching for Mark. Sometimes he was across the house. Sometimes he wasn't. That scared me even more. After dinner, Daniel's father asked if someone could help bring drinks up from the basement. Before anyone answered, Mark looked directly at me. I'll help Emma. No. The word escaped my mouth before I even realized it. The room fell quiet. Everyone looked at me. Daniel frowned. What happened? I just don't want to go downstairs. Mark laughed. I didn't realize I was that scary. The whole room laughed with him. Even Daniel smiled. See? He's joking. My face burned. I suddenly felt ridiculous. Maybe I really was overreacting. Daniel's mother handed the drinks to someone else. The conversation continued. Within seconds, everyone had forgotten about it. Everyone. Except Mark. As people carried plates into the kitchen, he walked past me. Without slowing down. Without looking at me. He quietly whispered. Good. Now they think you're the problem. I froze. By the time I turned around, he was already laughing with Daniel, as if nothing had happened. That was the moment I stopped wondering whether Mark wanted me. He wanted something much worse. He wanted everyone else to stop believing me before I ever told them the truth. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not my friends. Not even Daniel. Because every time I tried, I imagined the same conversation. Mark? There's no way he'd do something like that. That was the hardest part. Mark had spent years building the perfect reputation. He volunteered at charity events, helped his parents every weekend, remembered everyone's birthdays, bought thoughtful gifts. If someone had asked me to describe him before all this, I probably would have called him kind. Then Christmas arrived. Daniel insisted we stay at his parents' house for the entire weekend. The moment he told me, my stomach tightened. I wanted to refuse. Instead, I smiled. Okay. That single word haunted me before we had even packed our bags. The first evening passed quietly. Mark barely spoke to me. For a moment, I wondered if I had finally been left alone. Around midnight, I woke up thirsty. Daniel was asleep beside me. I slipped downstairs, trying not to wake anyone. The kitchen light was already on. Mark stood at the counter, pouring himself a glass of water. The moment he saw me, he smiled. Couldn't sleep? I ignored the question, filled my glass, turned toward the stairs. He stepped sideways, not enough to block my path completely, just enough that I'd have to squeeze past him. Excuse me. He didn't move. Instead, he lowered his voice. You've been avoiding me. I don't know what you're talking about. You do. His smile never disappeared. You think no one notices? I felt my pulse racing. Move. For the first time, his smile faded. He leaned in slightly. You know what I find interesting? You never say any of this when Daniel's around. I've tried. He chuckled, and he believed me. The words hit harder than anything he'd done before, because he wasn't guessing. He knew. He knew Daniel had dismissed every concern. Footsteps echoed upstairs. Mark stepped aside instantly. By the time Daniel entered the hallway, his brother was standing 6 feet away, drinking water. Daniel rubbed his eyes. You two okay? Before I could answer, Mark laughed. Emma scared me. I thought someone was breaking into the house. Daniel smiled. Then he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. See? I told you. He's harmless. I looked at Mark one last time. He raised his glass slightly, almost like a toast. And in that moment, I realized something that terrified me more than the touching itself. Mark wasn't afraid of getting caught. He was absolutely certain that if he ever was, his own brother would protect him. I stopped trying to convince Daniel, not because I'd given up, because I finally understood something. Every conversation ended the same way. I described what happened. Daniel explained why it hadn't. Facts didn't matter. His brother always received the benefit of the doubt. A week after Christmas, I met my best friend, Olivia, for lunch. She looked at me for less than 30 seconds before asking, "What's wrong?" I almost lied. Instead, everything came pouring out. The parties, the whispers, the touching, Daniel refusing to believe me. Olivia didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she asked a question no one else had asked. Has he ever behaved like that? In front of witnesses? I thought about it. Every single incident had happened when people were distracted. When Daniel stepped away. When someone answered the front door. When everyone was focused on something else. I slowly shook my head. Olivia leaned back. Emma, that's not random. He knows exactly what he is doing. Those words echoed in my head for days. I started paying attention. Not to Mark's hands. To his timing. It was almost unbelievable. If Daniel walked into another room, Mark appeared within seconds. If Daniel returned, Mark instantly stepped away. It happened over, and over, and over again. It wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern. Then something happened that I couldn't explain. Daniel and I were grocery shopping. Halfway through the produce aisle, my phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. There were only 6 words. Green looks beautiful on you today. I froze. I was wearing a green sweater. No name. No explanation. Just those 6 words. I slowly looked around the store. Families. Employees. Shopping carts. No Mark. Daniel noticed my expression. What happened? I almost showed him the message. Then I remembered Christmas. Instead, I quietly deleted it. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about it. There was only one person who would know what I was wearing. Someone who'd seen me without me seeing him. For the first time, I wasn't just afraid of my brother-in-law. I began wondering how long he'd been watching me. I couldn't prove the text came from Mark, so I tried to forget it. For almost 2 weeks, nothing happened. No family dinners, no unexpected visits, no strange messages. For the first time in months, I began to breathe again. Then Daniel came home smiling. "You'll love this." I already knew I wouldn't. Mark invited us to his cabin this weekend. Every muscle in my body tightened. I don't want to go. Daniel sighed. "Emma, can you tell me what this is really about?" "I already have." "No. You've told me what you think happened." "I've told you what happened." Daniel looked frustrated. "Do you know what you're asking me to believe? That my own brother, the man I've trusted my entire life, has secretly been harassing my wife?" "Yes." He rubbed his forehead. "There has to be another explanation." That sentence hurt more than I expected, because I finally understood. Daniel wasn't calling me a liar. He simply couldn't accept that the brother he admired might not exist. Saturday morning arrived. Against every instinct, I got into the car. The cabin sat beside a quiet lake, surrounded by pine trees. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt isolated. By evening, everyone gathered around a bonfire. Daniel's parents, a few cousins, Mark. People laughed, told old family stories, and passed drinks around. Then Daniel's father asked him to help fix the generator. The moment Daniel disappeared into the darkness, I stood up. I wasn't waiting. I headed straight for the cabin. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I walked faster. The footsteps did too. I reached the porch. Before I could grab the door handle, a voice spoke behind me. "You really should stop running from me." I turned. Mark stood 3 feet away. His smile was gone. For the first time, there was no pretending. "No one's out here. You don't have to act anymore." I reached for the door. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, blocking the only way inside. Then he smiled again. A smile I'd come to fear. And quietly, so quietly I almost wished I hadn't heard it, he said. "Even if you screamed, who do you think they'd believe?" I don't remember opening the cabin door. I only remember slamming it shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely lock it. For almost 5 minutes, I stood there, listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No knocking. No voice. When Daniel came back, I almost told him. Almost. Then Mark walked through the front door behind him, laughing. He handed Daniel a flashlight. "Generator's working again." He looked exactly like the man everyone loved. That night, I barely slept. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside our bedroom. They stopped. Then, very softly, someone tried the doorknob. It didn't open. Daniel had locked it before going to bed. The handle moved once more. Then, silence. I lay awake until sunrise. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen. Mark was already there, making pancakes. His mother smiled. Mark's always the first one awake. I stared at him. He smiled back. The same warm smile everyone else adored. On the drive home, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Someone tried our bedroom door last night. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. It was probably Dad. At 3 in the morning? He gets up early sometimes. It wasn't your father. Daniel sighed. Emma, you're connecting everything to Mark now. I turned toward the window. I didn't argue. Because I finally understood something. Daniel wasn't investigating my fears. He was investigating ways to explain them away. The following Wednesday, I was folding laundry when someone rang the doorbell. I opened the door. Mark stood on the porch, alone. What are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood. He lifted a toolbox. Daniel asked me to fix your leaking faucet. My stomach dropped. Daniel hadn't mentioned anything. I'll wait until he gets home. Mark didn't move. Instead, he smiled. You really don't trust me anymore, do you? I said nothing. For several long seconds, we simply stared at each other. Then, without another word, he turned around and walked back to his truck. The moment he disappeared around the corner, I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Did you ask Mark to come fix the faucet? There was a pause. Then Daniel said, Emma, I never called him today. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up. Because if Daniel hadn't sent him, then Mark hadn't come to fix anything. He'd come because he knew I was home alone. I locked every door, checked every window, closed every curtain. For the rest of that afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept asking myself the same question. How did Mark know I was home alone? That evening, Daniel arrived home carrying groceries. I told him everything, every single detail. He listened quietly. When I finished, he looked confused. I swear, I never asked him to come over. For a brief moment, I thought things were finally changing. Then Daniel picked up his phone. I'm calling him. 10 minutes later, Mark walked through our front door. He looked surprised. What happened? Daniel folded his arms. Emma says you came here today. I did. You said I asked you to fix the faucet. Mark frowned. Oh, I must have misunderstood. I thought you mentioned it last week. Daniel looked at me. See? It was just a misunderstanding. I stared at both of them. A misunderstanding? He'd driven 30 minutes, brought a toolbox, and somehow, that was a misunderstanding? Before leaving, Mark turned toward me. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. Daniel smiled. There. He apologized. Something inside me snapped. No, he didn't. Both of them looked at me. An apology starts with admitting what you did. He didn't. He apologized for how I felt. The room fell silent. Mark's expression changed for the first time. Only for a second. Then he smiled again. I think Em has been under a lot of stress. Daniel slowly nodded. I know. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not one question. Not one doubt. Just another explanation. That night, I sat alone in the living room. My eyes landed on the small security camera above our front door. Daniel had installed it 2 years earlier, after a package had been stolen. I opened the security app. The footage showed Mark arriving, standing on the porch, waiting. Then something caught my attention. He never knocked immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone, typed a message, waited. Only after about 30 seconds did he ring the bell. Confused, I checked my own phone. There it was. A text. Received exactly 30 seconds before the doorbell rang. Unknown number. Just 4 words. I'm outside. I stared at the screen. The same unknown number that had texted me at the grocery store. For months, I'd wondered if Mark was watching me. Now, I wasn't wondering anymore. I was starting to collect proof. That night, I stopped asking myself whether I was right. Instead, I asked a different question. How do I prove it? The security footage. The anonymous texts. Mark showing up uninvited. None of it proved harassment. It only proved that something wasn't normal. I needed something no one could explain away. The next morning, I bought a small voice recorder. It was barely bigger than a pack of gum. I hated myself for buying it, because buying it meant part of me believed I'd have to use it. 2 weeks passed. Nothing happened. No messages. No visits. No family gatherings. I almost convinced myself he'd finally stopped. Then Daniel told me his parents were hosting Easter dinner. I quietly slipped the recorder into my purse. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I was tired of being the only witness. Dinner was almost over when Daniel's mother asked me to bring more plates from the pantry. Before I could answer, Mark stood up. I'll help. Daniel smiled. Thanks. The moment we entered the pantry, I pressed the record button inside my purse. The door swung shut behind us. Neither of us spoke. I reached for a stack of plates. Then, I heard the lock click. My heart stopped. I slowly turned around. Mark was leaning against the door, still smiling. Relax. I'm just making sure nobody interrupts us. Open the door. Instead of answering, he took one slow step toward me. You know, I've been wondering something. What? Why do you keep pretending you don't enjoy the attention? I felt sick. I've asked you to leave me alone. He laughed quietly. No. You've asked when other people are nearby. But right now, it's just us. He reached toward me. I stepped backward. Don't touch me. For the first time, his smile disappeared completely. You really think Daniel's ever going to choose you? He already has. He just doesn't know it yet. Then, someone knocked on the pantry door. Everything okay in there? It was Daniel. Mark unlocked the door instantly. By the time it opened, he was holding 2 dinner plates, smiling like the perfect older brother again. Daniel looked between us. You guys taking inventory in here? Mark laughed. Emma couldn't decide which plates your mom wanted. Everyone laughed. Everyone. Except me. Because inside my purse, a tiny red light was still blinking. For the first time, Mark hadn't been talking only to me. He had been talking to the recorder. I waited 3 days. 3 of the longest days of my life. The recorder sat inside my dresser drawer. Every time I looked at it, I felt my heart race. I already knew what it contained. The question wasn't whether I should listen. It was whether I was ready to hear it. On the 4th night, Daniel was working late. I locked the bedroom door, sat on the edge of the bed, and pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then footsteps. The pantry door closing. My own voice. Nervous. Then Mark's voice. Crystal clear. I'm just making sure nobody interrupts us. My stomach twisted. Then came the next sentence. Why do you keep pretending you don't enjoy the attention? I stopped the recording. I couldn't breathe. For months, I'd questioned my own memory. Now, I was listening to proof. When Daniel came home, I met him in the living room. We need to talk. He looked exhausted. Can it wait until morning? No. Something in my voice made him stop. I placed the recorder on the coffee table. Please, don't interrupt. He nodded. I pressed play. The room filled with silence, followed by Mark's voice. Daniel didn't move. He didn't blink. Then came the sentence. You really think Daniel's ever going to choose you? I looked at my husband. The color had drained from his face. When the recording ended, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel whispered. I don't understand. You don't have to understand. You just have to believe me. He buried his face in his hands. I should have listened. I didn't answer. I'm sorry. Again, I said nothing, because apologies were no longer enough. Daniel reached for the recorder. His hands were trembling. I've defended him. Every single time. He looked at me. Tears filled his eyes. How many times did you try to tell me? I thought about the birthday party, Christmas, Thanksgiving, the cabin, the text messages. I stopped counting. Daniel stood up. He picked up his car keys. Where are you going? He looked at the recorder one last time, then quietly said, I'm going to ask my brother one question, and this time, I'm not going to let him lie. Daniel was gone for almost 3 hours. He didn't answer my calls. He didn't answer my messages. I sat in the living room, staring at the front door. When his headlights finally pulled into the driveway, I knew something had happened. The moment he stepped inside, I noticed the cut above his eyebrow. Daniel, what happened? He closed the door quietly. I confronted Mark. And? At first, he laughed. Daniel placed the recorder on the table. He said you edited it. I told him to listen. Daniel's voice trembled. When it got to the part where he said, you really think Daniel's ever going to choose you? He turned it off. What did he say? Daniel looked at the floor. He said, she's been trying to destroy this family for months. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. Then I asked him one question. What question? Daniel took a slow breath. I asked him, if you've done nothing wrong, why were you always careful to wait until I left the room? The room became silent. He couldn't answer. He just stood there, for almost a minute. Then, he punched me. I stared at him. He hit you? Daniel nodded. Our father pulled him away. My mother kept asking what was happening. I played the recording for both of them. I held my breath. My mother started crying. My father looked at Mark like he'd never seen him before. Daniel swallowed hard. Do you know what hurt the most? What? My father said. I noticed she stopped smiling at family dinners months ago. Daniel's voice cracked. He noticed. Everyone noticed something. But I was the only one who refused to ask why. He sat beside me. Not too close. Not expecting forgiveness. I failed you. You trusted me. And every single time, I chose the easier answer. Tears filled his eyes. I kept protecting the man I'd known my whole life, instead of believing the woman I'd promised to protect. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me for months. What happens now? Daniel looked toward the window, then quietly answered. My brother is no longer welcome in our lives, but whether I still deserve a place in yours isn't my decision anymore. People always ask me, what happened to Mark? The truth is, that became the least important part of the story. Within a week, Daniel's parents confronted him again. This time, he couldn't deny the recording. He insisted it was a joke. Then he claimed I'd misunderstood. Then he blamed stress. Finally, he blamed me. Every excuse changed. The truth never did. Daniel's parents made a decision. Mark was no longer welcome at family gatherings. Some relatives believed me immediately. Others stayed silent. A few insisted the whole family should just move on. I learned something important. When people are forced to choose between the truth and the version of someone they've believed in for years, some choose comfort. Months passed. The anonymous text messages stopped. No more unexpected visits. No more footsteps outside my door. For the first time in almost a year, I felt safe inside my own home. Daniel started going to counseling. Not because anyone forced him. Because he wanted to understand how someone he trusted could manipulate him for so long. One evening, he handed me a letter. I wrote this. You don't have to read it now. After he went to bed, I opened it. The first sentence read, I wasn't betrayed the day I heard the recording. I betrayed you every time you trusted me. And I chose the easier answer instead. I cried harder reading that letter than I had during the entire nightmare. Not because everything was suddenly fixed. It wasn't. Trust doesn't return overnight. Sometimes, it returns one honest conversation at a time. It's been 3 years now. Daniel and I are still together. Some people think I forgave him too easily. They didn't see the months of accountability, the counseling, the difficult conversations, the effort he made, every single day. Forgiveness isn't pretending something never happened. It's deciding whether someone is willing to become different. than the person who hurt you. If you're listening to this, and someone keeps making you question your own reality, pay attention. People who repeatedly cross your boundaries, then tell you you're imagining it, are not protecting your feelings. They're protecting themselves. And if the people you love dismiss your voice, don't let that become proof that you're wrong. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't surviving someone's behavior. It's surviving the loneliness of not being believed. But the truth doesn't become false just because someone refuses to hear it. I wish I'd learned that sooner. Maybe then, I wouldn't have spent so many months wondering whether I was losing my mind. I wasn't. I was simply waiting for the truth to finally have a voice.